David Brin once said, "When it comes to privacy and accountability, people always expect the former for themselves and the latter for everyone else." Privacy has become a big issue within the United States. Recently, I started to think about privacy in its relation to search and seizure within the school system. Lawful, that is. Search and seizure was not considered a legal issue until about 1985 during a court case, New Jersey versus TLO. Before I begin with the details of the case, I'd like to share the backstory. A female was caught in a restroom on school grounds by a faculty member smoking a cigarette. When the faculty member brought her before the principal, the student denied all the allegations made against her. She denied possession of the cigarette, and she denied smoking the cigarette. The principal decides to search through her purse. And in the purse he finds not only cigarettes, but drugs and a large sum of money, indicating that she had been selling drugs on school grounds or around school grounds. When the case was brought to trial, the court decided that the girl was protected under the Fourth Amendment, which states that each person has the right to be secure in their houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure. This left many to wonder, including myself, what constitutes as grounds to search a student. After the big controversy sparked by this case, the court system decided to come up with a new set of standards for the school system. These set of standards are what we like to call reasonable suspicion. In order to be considered to have reasonable suspicion, you need to meet two requirements as a school official. For one, you need to have evidence of a crime being committed or about to be committed, or a policy that is being broken or about to be broken, before you initiate the search. If there is evidence found and then you find cause, it will be dismissible in court. The second thing is the search must be relevant to the allegations being made against the student. It cannot be intrusive, and it must be considerate of the child's gender and age. When you take the time to think about the very idea of reasonable suspicion, it's quite shocking. What reasonable suspicion really boils down to is basic common sense, which makes it even more difficult to enforce. One school official's definition of reasonable, or what they believe to be reasonable, may be completely different from what a court considers reasonable. And it's all about interpretation of a law. And that's still something to be cleared up within the judicial system. An example of when a school's system does not meet the interpretation or definition of reasonable suspicion from a court standpoint is in the case A.S. versus State of Florida, 1997. An assistant principal sees a group of students huddled in a corner, and she proceeds to ask what they're doing. When she walks over, she sees one student put money in his pocket while the others have something else shuffling in theirs. When she takes them to the principal's office, assuming that she's just caught a drug exchange, they search the students, and sure enough, they find marijuana and money in the pockets. When the court hears about this case, they dismiss the case because the school did not search them under the pretense of reasonable suspicion. At first glance, this may seem absurd, how can this ruling be? But after analyzing it, it makes sense. First question you have to ask yourself is, what did this principal really see? Well, she saw young boys huddled in a corner. She saw money being put in the pocket. And she heard ruffling within the other person's pocket. But did she actually see anything harmful, such as drugs? She did not. It's too far of a fetch to assume that the student was selling drugs, so the search was not reasonable. Now that we've talked about school officials, let's talk about law enforcement officials and how they're permitted to search students. When I say law enforcement officials, I mean people such as SROs, or student resource officers, as they are called. A student resource officer needs one of two things to be able to search a student: either probable cause or the student's consent. Probable cause is just like reasonable suspicion, except it requires more evidence, actual cold, hard facts to be able to convict the student. When talking about consent, a resource officer should be concerned with the student's age, because that student may not be fully aware of their rights, specifically their Miranda rights, which state that you have the right to an attorney, you have the right to remain silent, and they should be warned that anything they say or do could be used in the court of law against them. So, when a resource officer questions a student, they should be concerned with custodial setting. And what custodial setting is generally when a student feels like they cannot leave an interrogation or questioning that is put on them by an SRO or another school official. One way that they can prevent that is to tell the student they can leave, make sure they know their rights, and if they do those things and take those measures, the things that they do or they find should be able to be used as evidence in the court for the case. One should know that there is a difference between searching an individual and searching an entire school and student body. There are laws put in place to protect the individual, such as reasonable suspicion and probable cause. But when searching an entire school or student body, that is considered a preventative measure in itself. Therefore, there are not laws or regulations governing those measures when it comes to searching and seizure. But one thing that is essential to keep in mind is that these preventative measures help keep students safe, and the faculty, of course. Parents send their children to school to learn in a safe environment, and it is the job of the school system to provide that safe environment. And one of the ways that they do that is through these preventative measures.